What's going on, everybody? Listen, I had to do it, okay? This is the Sony APS-C user channel after all, right? So I had to go and pick up the Sony A6700. I did a brief video on why I'm disappointed with Sony about the release of this camera because I felt like there were some things missing that Sony really should have added, like 2 card slots, which it doesn't have. But to be honest with you, objectively speaking, why would they? This is a A6000 line camera. Not one A6000 line camera has a 2 card slot. But I do want to go into this video and let you know what I think about this and is it a suitable upgrade to the Sony A6600? Let's get at it. Since the announcement of the Sony A6700, I knew I had to get it. As a Sony APS-C user, I knew this is a camera that I had to have in my library. I've been a user for Sony, I want to say since 2017. My first Sony camera was a Sony A6400, then I went and got the Sony A6600, then I got the Sony ZV-E10, and I also have the Sony FX30. I appreciate the APS-C line of cameras because first, the price. The cameras are less expensive and the lenses are less expensive and you can get similar quality to that of a full frame option. But I'm not about like trying to get the best is. I just want to produce great content, tell amazing stories, and make content that people will love, including myself. So I went with APS-C because it meets really all my needs except for the low light option. I don't shoot in heavy bokeh. I don't need huge blur backgrounds, just enough to separate the background from my subject. So I don't need, 1.2 full frame to get good quality content. But I will say that in low light, there is a huge struggle when you're using an APS-C camera. But if you are really looking to grow in videography and video creation, that shouldn't hinder you because you are in control of your lighting situation. Now, sometimes you're not, but getting the proper lights in the night while you're shooting is important because big films, budget films, they use lighting outside even with full frame cameras. So if low light is the only thing that's keeping you from getting an APS-C camera, don't, okay? These content creators out there with full frame videos have been using APS-C cameras for years, creating amazing content. And now that they're full frame, they're telling everybody to go full frame. You don't have to. But if you got the money for it, by all means. But I picked up the Sony A6700. And the video I did previously about it, saying that I was disappointed with Sony, was because the other camera makers have caught up to Sony in the digital camera scene, the mirrorless camera. They caught up to Sony. Some even surpassing, having more features than the Sony. But I am committed to the Sony ecosystem, so I have to stick with Sony APS-C for now. But I've been a user of this camera, the Sony A6600, for years, which I love. I love this camera. But there are some subtle differences, and you're probably wondering, should you get the Sony A6600, or should you just spend the extra money to get the Sony A6700? Now, what I appreciate about the release of this camera is that this camera, the Sony A6700, costs just as much as the Sony A6600 did when it first came out. And it has more video features than the Sony A6600. Now, when it comes to photography, both cameras are pretty much identical, except for the 24 megapixel sensor that's inside the Sony A6600 compared to the 26 megapixel sensor that's in the Sony A6700. Outside of that, you're going to get pretty much the same quality in photography. So I wouldn't necessarily upgrade from an A6600 to an A6700 if you're doing photography alone or if you're mainly a photography shooter. Don't waste your money. Stick with the A6600. But if you're a video shooter, a video creator, and you're wanting to take your video a little bit more seriously, and you're not a beginner, this is not a beginner camera for YouTubers and stuff like that. This is not a beginner camera. If you're just getting into video creation, I would not recommend the Sony A6700. I would definitely stick with the Sony ZV-E10 and then learn that camera and then upgrade from there. But if you're looking to upgrade your video, do better video, do you want to record in a 422 10-bit option? If you have a computer that can handle that kind of recording. If you want to do 120 slow motion, if you want to record in 4K, with great 4K actually, 4K 24, 4K 30, 4K 60, and 4K 120. With a caveat, the 4K 120 has a slight crop to it. This is the camera to get, especially if you're coming from the Sony A6600. Now, there's some minor differences. If you hold the cameras, actually, you can tell the difference. This Sony A6600 is a smaller camera, has a lighter grip here. It's smaller than this camera here, the Sony A6700, but it's A6700 is a lighter camera. And I think it's because of the mechanism for the flip up screen. Now, I mentioned this before. I prefer the flip up screen when you're recording video because let's say if you're ever vlogging and you're using this camera to vlog, you can look in the same direction to check your framing every now and then without the audience realizing that you're looking off the camera. But when you're using a flip out camera like the Sony A6700 has, you have to look to the side and it becomes obvious to the person watching that you're looking at the camera or the screen instead of the camera. So, but this is the first Sony A6000 camera with a flip out screen. Great option, yes, but I prefer the flip up screen. And I know that it blocks the hot shoe mount. So when you're mounting microphones here, it's a little bit of an inconvenience. But if you get a small rig hot shoe relocator, I have my microphones on the side here, like coming out this way, and it really did serve my purpose for vlogging or self-video shooting at that. Another thing about these two cameras when it comes to the screen is when it's flipped out like this, right? I have this thing that goes on the camera which allows me to rotate the camera to portrait without having to like take it off the mount. It just twists that easy. But it twists this way. So when you're using the A6700 and you go to twist the camera, the screen is blocked. So you can't see your framing. You have to go behind the camera or do what I'm doing. I have using my cell phone as a monitor. You can do that as well. But with the Sony A6600, if you're just shooting like Instagram videos, things like that, they're not uploading their videos on YouTube and Instagram in 10-bit anyway. So they're going to compress it to 8-bit. So you can use this camera, and when you do it, you put it on the thing and you go sideways, you can still see yourself in the framing. So there's a benefit. But the mechanism is annoying though. It's a heavy mechanism, which is why this camera is way lighter. But I tell you what, with this camera and overheating, that never happened. I never had this camera overheat on me. However, when you watch videos on YouTube, a few people have had this camera overheat on them in testing, the Sony A6700. So I need to be watchful about that. But now let's talk about the other subtle differences. 24 megapixels on the A6600, 26 on the A6700. It has about the same amount of wheels. This has one more custom button on the top. But outside of that, this is pretty much more of a basic setup than the Sony A6600, which you probably want. But what I also like about this specific camera is that they have a separate slider for the photo, video, and S&Q mode. But with this, it's all on one. So it makes it pretty difficult when it comes to manually putting in your settings. And from my understanding with this camera, the Sony A6700, and this is great for video shooters, it'll save the settings for each photo, video, and S&Q modes separately, so that when you switch it, it automatically goes to the settings that you picked last, which is good, or the setting you have set. Yeah, again, if you have the A6600 and you're looking to upgrade, unless you're doing like pro level video, I wouldn't upgrade. Stick with the A6600. But if you're looking to go heavy into video and stay inside the APS-C Sony ecosystem, the Sony A6700 would be a great option, especially if you have the Sony FX30. This would be a great B camera option to the Sony FX30. But mind you, keep in mind that this has one card slot, just like the other Sony A6000 cameras, one card slot. It does have a mic in jack. It does have a headphone jack, but the buttons, the doors are different, which I gotta be honest with you, I don't really like it. If you look here, it's hard to open, and I feel like it's gonna break easy. I gotta be honest, I prefer the button layout or the doors on the Sony A6600. You slide it out, open it, everything is together. I get it, but yeah, it's close is easier. I just like this better. It's hard for me to open this, especially if you don't have like a lot of big nails. But another difference between these two cameras, this is charged by the older USB micro, where this has USB-C charging. Another difference that you're gonna love is that the SD card is now on the side here and not underneath where the battery is, like the Sony A6600, which was annoying to change. I hated changing this battery. I would rather just plug it in than change the battery. But yeah, so this is a great option. What's the same is the resolution of the viewfinder. That hasn't changed. But again, it's fine, a great camera to get. But if you already have the A6600 and you're not doing anything crazy with video, I would recommend waiting, especially since Sony cameras go on sale so often. When you look at places like Adorama, where I got this camera from, B&H Photo, they always go on sale. And by the way, I am selling this camera. So if you would like to buy this camera, shoot me a DM on my Instagram and we can negotiate a price. I have a price already in mind. I'm not going to go under, but we can negotiate the price. But yeah, this is a great option, great camera. I'm excited to really use it, see how it feels. Again, it's lighter. This is a great travel camera, minus the single card slot. But it's a great travel camera. This has had a single card slot. This has a single card slot. And rarely do you hear anybody complaining about using a single card camera. Every now and then you can get some things happen, like the card messes up. But outside of that, like I've never had a problem with memory cards in any of my cameras. And now that I say that, watch it happen. So, but there's also things that you can do to help with that. Like external recording through the through the HDMI, which is also an HDMI mini. Again, let's be realistic. Some people are complaining about the HDMI being a mini HDMI. This isn't a 6000 camera. Not one 6000 camera has a regular HDMI input. In fact, if you want to go that route, just go get the Sony FX30, which I'm recording on right now. That has not only a full-size HDMI input, it also has 2 card slots. So use that as well. Another thing to consider with this camera is because it shoots in 10-bit 422 at higher codec f4K shooting and HD shooting, you have to get, and I would recommend you get, a V90 card minimum, okay, a SD V90 card, because you don't want to get like a V30 card, start recording, and you realize the quality is not good, it's not fast enough card, and you're out shooting, and then you can't get the shot. But I am going to start using this camera. I know I'm going to love it. It's a great camera. Sony makes great product. But again, Sony, if you're watching this, it's very important that you stay ahead of the game. When it comes to the APS-C cameras, when it comes to even your full frame options, other camera companies have caught up. And now they're doing things that you guys haven't projected yet. Now, I remember when you guys first came out, when I was a Nikon user, and I was like, I'm never going Sony. I used to argue with my friend who was a Sony shooter. I said, no, I'm going Nikon. That's when I was doing primarily photography. And you guys are doing things that Nikon could not compete with, that Canon was doing, but like you superseded it, from the price of the cameras to 4K recording to the USB webcam option. You guys were the first ones to do that. And now all these other camera companies are catching up and adding things to the cameras that you guys don't have yet. So I want you guys to stay ahead of the game. That's why I went Sony. That's why I will stay Sony. And I can speak to a lot of other Sony users. Or speak for them at least. They probably feel the same way. So I am excited about using this camera. I really want to test out the 4K streaming option. Okay, after I get a fan for the camera, I ordered a fan for Ulanzi. It's going to fit right here, similar to the FX30. So I'm going to make this like a mini FX30 with a fan. And I'm going to try that option. But I'm also going to compare this camera to the FX30 and the Sony ZV-E10 to see if this is worth an option. Like does it even not, like, is it worth it to get the ZV-E10 if you have a flip out screen and everything that the ZV-E10 can do? Now, mind you, I will say this. This is not, like I said before, a beginner camera for YouTubers. The best beginner camera you guys can get is the Sony ZV-E10. The best. It's inexpensive. It has great quality. It has all the vlogging and video capabilities you need to upload content on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. And so this is not the best option if you're just getting into video creation. But if you have the ZV-E10 and you're looking for a second camera, this is definitely a good camera to get, especially if you have APS-C lenses like I do. But I'm excited to get working with this camera. I'm really excited. And when I upload new videos, as far as comparing this camera to the FX30 and the ZV-E10, I want you guys to be there for the ride. So make sure you guys subscribe to the channel right now so that you are notified when I upload those videos, because it will be soon. It will be soon. And if you're interested in buying this camera, the Sony A6600 at a fraction of what everybody else is charging for their used cameras, hit me up. And if you're watching this in a year from now, this camera's already sold. Don't even bother hitting me up. Or maybe it's not sold yet. Hit me up anyway. All right. Listen, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hope you found value in it. And hit the like button. It lets YouTube know that this is a video worth sharing out. And it'll allow other people to have an option to watch this video as well. So stay tuned to the channel to see what I create with the Sony A6700. I'm out.